All right, so hello and welcome to this online practice. This is going to be about a 30-minute practice that is the sequence is for this idea of overwhelm and kind of chronic stress when we've just got a lot going on and everything is building up. It's really nice to have something that can counteract that in a way and start to kind of unwind a lot of the stuff that's going on. And so the practice is pretty slow and subtle, and we'll take moments of pause where the idea is just to notice what's happening, any of the sensations, just kind of how we feel. Sometimes that might be you feel a physical sensation, other times it might be an emotion like even just irritation or a feeling of boredom, or you might feel really good and elated, and whatever it is, the kind of idea is to start to separate maybe like from ourselves that we know, to observe what's happening in a slightly more neutral way. So it's like creating a gap between, or this ability to be able to respond rather than react all the time. And that's what we're in a sense doing. We're cultivating our interoceptive abilities through this practice. So thanks for joining me. I have got a blanket that I'm sitting on right now, and you don't need one, but if you do have something like a blanket or a towel or a cushion, you just want a little bit more support, you might want to use that. But otherwise, we're going to start off in a reclined position. Now, I like using the blanket because I've got a pretty big blanket here in different ways. You might have a set of cushions or even a bolster. And if you've got a blanket, you can kind of roll it up. I'm going to make this long roll like that and actually lie back over it. The reason being is that it just helps to open the chest sometimes. So I'm going to give a lot of options because we all have really different bodies, and if it feels super uncomfortable to lie over a blanket or a bolster, then don't do it, right? Then you're just going to lie on the ground. The other way of using the blanket would be just to support under your head, or don't use the blanket at all, or maybe make the floor a little bit warmer, anything like that. So again, I'll show you if you're using something under the back, I'm going to bring it into the lower back, but I'm not sitting on it, my butt's on the floor. And then I come back down over the blanket so that we get this opening across the chest. And the idea is you've actually got space to breathe. So often it's like we're kind of collapsing in on ourselves, and this way can just open up. But again, if it doesn't feel right for you, if you're kind of aware of that, then taking it out. And my arms can either come up to side, maybe resting on the body. Might keep my knees bent. Maybe I take my legs out long, or anything else that works for you. So again, you could just be lying flat on your back. And then the invitation is to close down the eyes or just soften your gaze. If you notice that closing your eyes doesn't feel comfortable, then don't worry about it. We'll start off with this kind of the option to take a full breath in through the nose and a sigh and release out the mouth. If your nose is blocked though, of course, just breathe in through the mouth. You can stay with a breath like that, or maybe starting to breathe in and out through the nose. And then we're going to work with this who breath. So it's quite a helpful relaxation breath in theory. So the idea is I'm going to breathe in through the nose or the mouth, depending. And then we're going to intentionally breathe out the mouth. Now it's like you're holding a straw in between the lips, so we've got pursed lips a little bit. And it gets called the who because it's like you're about to say the word who. That's kind of the mouth shape you're making. So I breathe in, and then it's and then invite the inhale back in. So try and notice you don't want to get to a point on the exhale where you're gasping for air on the inhale. Then just make that exhale a little bit shorter. And as you're doing it, you are trying to intentionally slow down, but give yourself a few rounds to get into that. If the breath feels a little bit chaotic, you don't want to force anything. So we'll take a few rounds like this, breathing in through the nose. And then out through the straw, out through the mouth. And let's take about anywhere between 2 and 5 more rounds, depending on the pace. And then just letting go of that who breath, and maybe your eyes are closed or just a soft gaze. And just this moment of releasing that breath, coming back to your natural rhythm and noticing how that feels. And so also know when I'm saying notice, you might not notice anything, but the fact that you've noticed nothing is also the art of noticing. So that's kind of where it can begin sometimes. So just allowing yourself to sort of celebrate that it can be a really challenging thing to notice these subtle changes of how does my breath feel, or what are the sensations that are happening in my body. And when we've experienced overwhelm and a lot of chronic stress, it's even harder, right, to sense that. So we're very slowly coming back into the body to start to notice, and just, if you can, having patience with yourself, and the moments that you do notice, see if you can kind of just a little teeny tiny bit celebrate them with yourself. A few more breaths here. Beautiful. Alrighty. So if you were lying on any props, you can bring your feet up if they were extended long, and I'm just going to roll off to the side gently and then slide that blanket out from underneath me. I'm going to shuffle out the way, and then coming back, so now you're on the back. If you're already on the back, perfect, stay as you are. We'll bring the arms, I'm just going to leave out the way. Bringing the arms out beside you, and here you might like to notice, do I prefer my palms facing up, or do I prefer my palms facing down? And maybe even bringing your attention to how that feels through the shoulders and the chest. Again, if you have no preference, then just kind of seeing if you can choose one. And if you really don't know, maybe turn the palms up. And then we're going to toe heel the feet out to the edges of the mat. You might walk the feet a little further away from you as well. And then starting to add on this twist. So we'll let both knees come over towards one side. If you've got pain or kind of tightness and irritation in your lower back, then you don't have to go all the way, right? So kind of stop that at about halfway, just where it feels okay, where you can kind of maintain a sense of awareness from the lower belly, from that center. So it's as if you're moving from there. But inviting this sense of twist into your body today, but with this really slow and intentional and mindful attention. So there's one thing just doing something fast and not bringing our awareness to the body, but it's another whole process, a whole activity, if you start to bring your attention to what you're doing. So your focus is on the breath, and then your focus, your attention is really on your movement. Like, wow, is there a rhythm in my body and breath that I can start to tune into? And we all have one, right? We all have our own rhythm of movement and our own rhythm of breath. it can just feel like we've lost it, right? We're not sure how to access it or find it again. And so as we slow down, we begin to come back into our own center, our own space in our bodies, which is a pretty beautiful process and sometimes a little frustrating, starting to come back. It's okay. You might notice that you're moving faster than me or slower. It's perfectly fine. And then bringing the feet back into center. And again, maybe that moment, just for a breath of pause. Is there anything you can notice here? Sensations through maybe the back or the hips, the lower belly, maybe even up into the shoulders. I sometimes am really aware of the back of my head on the floor. I should say, if that is happening to you in a really uncomfortable way, feel free to bring a blanket or a cushion under your head. And then I'm going to toe heel my feet together, so my ankles are touching, and that's more just to know where they are in space. And then I'm going to toe heel them kind of once away from each other, so it's a slightly narrower stance. I bring my arms in a little bit closer just to feel more grounded. And then the focus is coming more down into the pelvis, so these pelvic tilts. So with my inhale, I'm going to tilt my pelvis forward, so I create this arch, right? I'm lifting my lower back off the floor, but my butt stays down. And maybe with my in-breath, so it's like my belly's expanding too as I come forward. And then to reverse the movement, I'm going to come back, like I'm tucking it all underneath, pressing the lower back into the floor and just drawing the belly button in towards the spine. So maybe you just start with that movement, and for a lot of us, this is a really challenging movement to connect to, or to reconnect to, I should say. So if that's happening for you, just take your time. You might even start to imagine it first, like how do I move that? Or if it feels really mechanical, just working with that, but bringing your awareness and your attention to what you're doing. And over time, it will start to kind of slow down, and there'll be this more rhythmic sense that comes with it. And the invitation as you've got the movement is then to kind of add the breath. So it's inhale as you tilt forward and exhale back. And then let's come back to center and just pausing there. And then we're going to add a little bit more by lifting the hips. So you can either keep your hands, if you had them up, you could have them up. I quite like to turn them down, but again, adjusting at any point if you want your palms facing up or pressing down a little more. And this time I'm going to start again with the movement by tilting my pelvis forward and then tilting back, pressing down through the hands and the feet, light squeeze with the inner thighs and starting to lift your hips towards the ceiling or wherever you are. And again, this movement doesn't have to be super high. In fact, if you're coming up and your back's like, I don't like that, or there's sort of more pain and irritation, then maybe don't lift your hips as high. And rolling through the spine to lift and lower. And that invitation again is to really connect to the breath awareness. So an inhale as you tilt forward, exhale coming back, and then we're going to inhale to lift. And an exhale to lower down. And you might have a whole round of breath as well if you're doing those pelvic tilts. It's actually inhale forward. But at any point, if coordinating the breath becomes a little bit too much, just try and keep an even rhythm of your breath and then flowing with the movement. We'll take one more like that. And as you come down, you might pause. Might even like to take the feet out a little wider and just let the knees knock in towards each other. Or maybe extend the legs long. And then a moment, maybe the knees in towards the chest. You might prefer to have your legs out long, or a little bit of movement side to side. And then we're going to make our way up into like a tabletop position or on all fours. So feel free to rock and roll. I quite like to lie out to the side because we've been on the back for a little while, and just take a moment to pause. Again, this idea of we sort of go from thing to thing to thing, and in the practice you can kind of slow down, have more intention, and really taking your time, being really mindful with what you're doing. So coming all the way kind of up and over, and we're going to set up for a tabletop position. So if your floor's really hard underneath you, maybe using your blanket or anything else you've got to support your knees. And I'm going to come into this tabletop position, so wrists are underneath the shoulders and knees about underneath the hips, right? But explore, you might want to turn your hands out a little bit more, or in a little bit more. You might want your hands wider. Seeing how that feels by shifting the weight forward and back, so the weight is coming over the hands and the fingers. And then as you've found the movement, what we're doing, then can you bring all of your attention and your focus as much as you can back to the breath. And you might even adjust the hands slightly forward as we begin to come forward, and then sink back towards a child's pose. So your hips might come all the way back to your heels, but they might not, right? And you just stop where your body wants to stop. And then we come forward. You can kind of reach your chest beyond your hands, and then back. And forward. Just a few more rounds like that. You can even add in, if you know it, like a little bit of this cat-cow where we're sort of rounding and doing the spine as you move. So letting there be a little bit of that movement, like I sink, I'll soften the belly towards the floor as I come forward, and then round and dome a little bit as I come back. Just an option to add that in as well. And then we're going to add on our downward facing dog. But if you prefer, and especially if your wrists are feeling a little bit fatigued today, you might just stay with this movement or pause in child's pose for a longer period of time. Otherwise, we'll add in the movement of down dog. So it'll be down dog, tabletop, and child's pose together. And I've taken my hands a little further forward because it works in my body, but up to you. And then coming up on the toes, I'm going to lift the hips towards the ceiling and keep a nice bend in the knees to start. And maybe even bending and peeling out. So I'm really trying to work more with the length of my spine to be long rather than trying to force the legs towards straight. So I can kind of press the chest, right, my chest back towards the shins. If your shoulders are really tight, it's going to feel pretty challenging. It's okay. Again, patience is key. And then we come down to the knees. And then back to child's. And let's just take a few rounds like that with your breath. And then finding a place after maybe your next full round of where you can pause. You might like to pause up in a down dog. You might like to pause in tabletop or maybe back in child's pose. You might even sit back on your heels. So you can just take a seat. That can be nice as well. Up to you. The intention or the invitation is to find stillness for a moment. Are you able to bring your attention in and just notice what there is to notice, whether it's sensation through the shoulders, maybe it's through the back or the legs, maybe your breath rhythm has changed. Beautiful. So now we're going to come up to standing just for a little bit. So any way you'd like to get up, you just want to use your hands and knees to come up from here. And then find yourself in a standing position. So your feet could be maybe about your hip distance apart, but it's again such personal preference. Like you might prefer your feet slightly turned out, you might actually prefer them together. And where do you feel nice and grounded and centered through the feet? So it's kind of like you're pushing through the center of the ball of the big toe, the ball of the little toe, and the center of the heel. And then take a moment, rolling the shoulders back, arms forward. Maybe you close down the eyes just for a moment or soften your gaze towards the floor. Just noticing how your body arrives here. Taking one full breath. Beautiful. And then we'll reach the arms up over your head. And the hands can come down, bending the knees, and we'll take it into a standing forward fold. So your standing forward fold might be that the elbows come onto the knees. You might even, if the back's feeling really tight today, you might like your hands on your thighs here, your shins, just give a little more support to find length through the lower back. That's kind of what we're after. But if there's a little bit more space for you and you quite like it, you could come down further and hold opposite elbows and then maybe bend and straighten. Just take a few breaths here, letting the head be below the heart. Of course, if you feel like you need to come up at any time, otherwise just staying with that grounding through the feet. See if you can keep that connection with your breath. Beautiful. And then pressing down through the feet, we'll release the arms. Maybe you walk the hands up the legs or gently come all the way up, slowly lifting the head. And then you can reach maybe the arms up and letting the hands come down. Fantastic. So we'll come back down, this time coming into a seated position. So if you want to sit up on the heels, you could do that. Maybe you want to sit cross-legged. And maybe for some, if sitting on the heels is pretty intense, you can have your rolled up blanket. And you're going to bring it in underneath here. And then just use it for the tops of your feet, if that just kind of softens the sensation there, or any other way of using your blanket to find a seat that you can sit in. You could also use a chair, right, if you'd like to. So let's give the shoulders a little bit of a roll. And then we'll take the right hand out to the side, maybe it's up on the blanket or something else to give you a bit more support, or the floor. And then the left arm's going to come up, I'm going to bend that elbow, and we're going to add a little bit of this kind of side body opening here. So the options with the inhale, I reach and find length, and then the exhale, I'm going to draw back. And inhale, open, and exhale back. And just take a few like this. Again, remembering that adding in the coordination of the breath might come later. You might just be working first with the movement, and that's absolutely fine, and just keeping some sense of ease with your breath if you can. Celebrating those little wins. Even though it seems simple, it can actually be quite complex if you're not used to doing this type of thing. And then we're going to reach and just pause for a moment there, taking a full breath. Beautiful. And come through the center. And in this moment to pause here. So you can have your hands resting in whatever way feels right, maybe palms facing up or down. Option to close down the eyes or soften the gaze. And then noticing, can you feel any different sensations from the right to the left? You might just notice a feeling of irritation, of really wanting to even out the other side. And again, rather than having to kind of attach to that thought, you take a moment and be like, oh, look, I'm irritated. How interesting. And that's how we train that kind of gap, that stepping back a little bit to observe and notice. One more breath if you've got it here. Beautiful. And then we'll take the other side. So the left hand will come down, right arm comes up, taking that cactus, and we're going to reach again, lengthen, and drawing it back. And open out. So again, maybe it's inhale, lengthen, and exhale back. You might notice your breath wants to take the other way around. It's totally fine because it's your rhythm. Remembering that our breath rhythm is about as unique as our thumbprint. Okay, you're not trying to fit yourself into another box. The purpose is to find, well, your own box, I guess. Take 2 more moving like this. And then reach over and hold. Beautiful. Come back and a moment to settle, if you can. Maybe the eyes close down or drop the gaze. Take a round of breath and then just noticing maybe there's similarities this time between the right and left. Maybe they feel different. Maybe you can't notice anything at all, and that's totally okay. That's still something that you're noticing. Perfect. So let's come out of the seat and we'll make our way down onto the back once again. And slide the blanket, if you were using it, out of the way. Make your way back onto your back. And we'll take that right knee in towards the chest and bring the left leg long, or whichever leg you've taken. There'll be a little bit of movement. And we're going to add a twist. So the left hand will come onto the right knee. I'm going to start to cross that leg over the body. I might add a little bit of movement, just gently coming in and out. And then try and notice what happens to your right shoulder. See if you can keep a sense of it drawing down towards the floor. So there's this opening up and really into this mid part of the back. So we're trying to open and breathe into the thoracic spine. We'll take maybe just 2 or 3 rounds of breath, very much depending. It might be more like 5 or 6 for you, it's fine. Beautiful, and then coming back through the centre. You're going to slide that right leg long. Let it settle for a moment. Again, that noticing of like, ooh, how do the different sides feel? And then we draw the left leg in. Knee coming in towards the chest. Any little movement. And then right hand to the knee. We're going to start to cross it over once again. The twist, maybe you're moving in and out for a moment. Going into that left shoulder, can you kind of think about keeping it grounded to the floor? And then you might pause and notice the breath, keep the rhythm going. Beautiful. Making your way back through the centre. Maybe you slide that leg up for a moment just to settle and notice the sides coming back. And we'll come into our final place, our final pose. Not a Shavasana, but it's just this kind of integration and rest. And we'll be here for a minute today, okay? So if you feel like you want to bring the knees into the chest first, feel free to do that or anything else. And then when you set up for this pose, it might be that you like to lie on your back, just like this. But if this doesn't feel comfortable, feel free to modify it, which might be something like having the hands on the body, or you might like the knees bent. Or you could use your blanket to actually slide underneath the knees and give a little support if it's tight in your lower back. You might also prefer to lie on your side. This is so nice. Or you could lie all the way around your front, or you could come up to a seat. Whatever feels the best for you. Just for this next minute to, in a sense, let go of any of that conscious control of your breathing. And maybe your eyes close down, or you keep your eyes just open and maybe softly Seeing if you can find that stillness and just let all of the good work you've done in this practice, just let that settle and integrate. Coming into maybe a feeling or a sense of just acceptance for exactly what is right now. And then we'll be in silence for about 30 seconds. Beautiful. And if you do feel like staying here longer, then by all means, please stay longer and enjoy the work you've done. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. You might just want to, as you're coming out, wriggle the fingers and the toes or roll to one side. Maybe you make your way up. And just being really easy, maybe having some tea or taking your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me, and go well.